It began the way many eerie stories do on an ordinary day that hinted at nothing unusual. The sky stretched above with a wan autumn sun, the distant call of crows echoing through the pines. Ranger Lucas Monroe adjusted the brim of his hat, keeping one hand on the steering wheel as he navigated the bumpy forest road. The old pickup rattled with every rotten rock, dust swirling in its wake. Lucas had spent the last 5 years working for the National Park Service, transferring between various stations until he'd landed at Pine Haven Reserve. At first glance, Pine Haven was a gorgeous sweep of wilderness, sprawling groves of aspen and fir, small lakes that glistened like jewels, and mountains looming on the horizon. But every local he met seemed to mention rumors of strange lights flickers in the trees at night that couldn't be traced to flashlights or campfires. Though there had never been any official statement about these sightings, they were so frequent that locals had nicknamed the phenomenon the Old Lanterns. Some claimed they were ghosts of loggers who once cut the forest. Others insisted they were fireflies or swamp gas, even though there were no swamps for miles. Yet the stories persisted, whispered at the local diner, repeated around bonfires. Lucas, a pragmatic man by nature, dismissed most folklore as exaggerations. But the frequency of these stories rattled him just enough that he'd once inquired with his supervisor, Ranger Kelly. She shrugged it off. "I've seen them once or twice, but it's probably just reflection from minerals in the soil," she said with an unconvinced expression. Her words didn't match her tone, a low hush that betrayed unease. That day's assignment was routine. Check the boundary lines near the northern perimeter of the reserve, update signage, and verify that no off-road vehicles had sneaked in. But pinned to the bottom of his to-do list was a note in Kelly's handwriting. "Investigate reported lights near Terrapin Creek." Lucas sighed, recalling the conversation. Terrapin Creek was the epicenter of the so-called Old Lantern sightings. He'd read multiple incident logs describing small flickers gliding along the water's edge at night, often vanishing the moment anyone tried to approach. Some hikers swore they had heard voices whispering, though not in any language they recognized. He found himself both annoyed and intrigued. Part of him hoped to lay the rumors to rest once and for all. Another part sensed that if something truly bizarre lurked in the forest, it was better to know and be prepared. Lucas parked the truck on a narrow dirt shoulder near Terrapin Creek. A faint breeze stirred pine needles overhead, creating a whispering sound that merged with the soft gurgle of the creek. The air smelled crisp, tinged with the aroma of damp earth and decaying leaves. Autumn was in full swing, painting the forest in gold, russet, and orange. He took his time surveying the area. Tall conifers stood like silent sentinels, their branches weaving a tapestry of shadows. No footprints marred the ground except for deer tracks. He found no sign of campers, no obvious cause for flickering lights or illusions. As dusk crept closer, Lucas decided he'd wait until dark to see if anything happened. He made a small camp a few yards from the creek, a simple tarp where he could sit and observe. He felt a bit foolish-like a detective waiting for a suspect who might never arrive. Hours passed, and the forest transitioned from twilight to night. The wind died down, leaving an almost oppressive hush. Stars winked overhead, framed by the jagged silhouettes of pines. Lucas remained alert, scanning for any glimmers. Initially, there was nothing out of the ordinary. The creek reflected faint moonlight, an occasional nocturnal bird calling in the distance. Then, just as Lucas began to think the rumors were nonsense, he saw it. A light in the distance, bobbing among the trees. He stiffened. It was no mere flash of a firefly or reflection of the moon on water. This was a steady glow, pale yellow, swaying as if carried by someone. Lucas rose quietly, trying to keep the beam of his flashlight off. He wanted to observe it naturally, without scaring it away if it could be scared at all. His heart thumped hard enough to feel in his throat. Carefully, he stepped closer, weaving between tree trunks until he was perhaps 30 yards from the glow. He could make out the silhouette of a person tall, with a hood or wide-brimmed hat holding a lantern. Lucas mustered his ranger voice. "Hello there. This is Ranger Monroe. Are you lost?" The figure paused, the lantern light illuminating half of what looked like a face hidden in shadow. Then it spoke in a low, resonant tone. "Leave this place. Something about that voice made the hair on Lucas's arms stand on end. It wasn't loud, but it carried an unearthly quality like multiple faint echoes chasing each word. "Sir or ma'am," Lucas began, stepping carefully over exposed roots, "I'm with the National Park Service. I'm just doing my patrol." The figure lifted the lantern higher, and the glow seemed to intensify. "You should not be here after dark," they said. "I'm warning you." Lucas opened his mouth to ask why, but the question stuck. A chill rippled down his back, an animal instinct that screamed danger. He gripped his flashlight as though it were a weapon. With a slow, deliberate movement, the lantern-bearer turned and walked deeper into the forest, gliding between the trees until the glow vanished. Lucas stood there, heart pounding. He glanced around, uncertain if he should follow. Every bit of training told him not to chase unknown individuals at night alone. But curiosity tugged at him. Who the hell was that? In the end, caution won. He returned to his makeshift camp, collected his gear, and left the area. He told himself he'd file a report and come back with backup, maybe a fellow ranger. But as he drove away, he couldn't shake the sensation that the figure's warning had been genuine, as though the forest itself conspired to hide something. Back at the ranger station, a squat building perched near the main road, Lucas typed up his report. Encountered unidentified individual holding a lantern in Terrapin Creek area after sunset. They warned me to leave, possibly a vagrant or local eccentric. He felt uneasy using the word vagrant, but he had no other label. The next morning, he planned to consult with Kelly, perhaps do a daytime sweep. For now, he'd rest. The station was quiet at night. There were only 2 bedrooms for overnight rangers, each with a metal cot and a single desk. The walls were austere, and the air smelled like pine-scented disinfectant. Lucas locked the doors, turned out the lights, and sank onto his cot, drained from the evening. Sleep did not come easily. He tossed and turned, mind replaying the lantern's glow in the darkness. When he finally drifted off, he dreamed. In the dream, he stood again by Terrapin Creek under a sky devoid of stars. The only light was that same pale lantern glow drifting through the forest. Yet the dream forest felt distorted trees twisted at unnatural angles. The creek ran uphill, and the wind carried echoes of voices he couldn't understand. He moved as if weightless, feet not quite touching the ground. He floated behind the lantern's light, which flickered in and out of sight between gnarled pines. Suddenly, the light flared, revealing the same figure from earlier, but this time the face was clearer. It wasn't precisely human. The eyes were too large, too reflective, and the mouth was set in a grim line, lips thinning to nearly nothing. The figure lifted a finger to where its lips should have been, as though telling him to remain silent. Lucas froze. He felt a presence behind him, a sense of something enormous looming just out of sight. Then the forest itself seemed to shift, the pines bending like living walls, closing in around him. The lantern figure whispered, "I warned you, now you've seen." A monstrous shape lunged from the darkness, and the dream shattered. Lucas awoke drenched in sweat, lungs gasping for air. He lay in his darkened room, heart galloping. The silence pressed down, no hum of traffic, no distant voices. Just the wind outside, rustling branches. He stared at the ceiling, trying to quell the panic. Eventually his breathing steadied. Then he heard a faint sound, so soft he initially thought it was part of the dream. Creak. The door to his room had opened a crack. Lucas jumped, switching on his bedside lamp. The door was ajar by a few inches, as though someone had quietly pushed it open. A moment of sheer dread ran through him. He knew he'd locked the station door, and no one else was on shift this night. He grabbed his flashlight, heart thumping like a drum. Rising from bed, he crept to the door. The corridor beyond was dark, illuminated only by the emergency exit sign's red glow. No sign of an intruder, yet the front door stood wide open, letting in a draft. Had he forgotten to lock it? No, he was certain he'd turned the deadbolt. And now it was unlatched, the door yawning to reveal the moonlit yard. Outside, near the edge of the trees, a faint light flickered. It was small, like a candle or a distant lantern. As Lucas stood there, shivering in the chill air, the light withdrew deeper into the forest, vanishing behind a cluster of aspens. He swallowed hard, adrenaline roaring in his veins. What if the figure had followed him all the way here? But why? And how had they gotten inside? He approached the threshold, shining his flashlight around the station's exterior. Nothing moved except branches swaying. A sense of violation swept through him. This mysterious figure had come to his station, likely opened the door while he slept, but left without harming him. Was this another warning? Or a threat? He shut the door and locked it again, this time sliding a steel bar across the frame. Sleep was impossible after that. He sat in the main office, mug of coffee in hand, watching the window, but no more lights appeared. The moment dawn broke, he stepped outside to check for footprints or any sign of forced entry. Despite the ground's softness, he found no footprints at all. Later that morning, Ranger Kelly arrived. She was a tall woman in her 40s with a confident stride, though lines of worry now etched her face when Lucas recounted what had happened overnight. "That's unsettling," she said, drumming her fingers on the desk. "You're sure you locked the doors?" "Positive," Lucas replied. He showed her the log entry from the previous night, plus his own notes about the dream. She studied him, eyes narrowed. "I've heard stories, seen fleeting lights from time to time, but no one's ever claimed they were followed or their doors were opened." "Well, this figure actually spoke to me out there," Lucas said, frustration seeping into his voice. "Warned me away, then apparently came to the station. Does that ring any bells?" Kelly tapped a pen against her clipboard. "Some locals refer to a lantern keeper, an entity or spirit that roams these woods at night. They say if you see the lantern, it's a sign to stay away because something more dangerous lurks. Honestly, I always chalked it up to a campfire story." She paused, sighing. "But maybe there's more to it. I've got no rational explanation for an intruder who leaves no tracks." They decided to drive to the nearest town to question a few locals who were known for collecting folklore. Kelly believed there might be some older residents with deeper knowledge. They arrived in the small logging town of Timber Bend, a place of fewer than 800 souls. Streets were lined with rust-brown leaves, small shops, and a single cafe that doubled as a bar. Kelly led Lucas to an old Victorian-style house at the edge of town. Wind chimes tinkled on the porch. A withered woman answered the door. Lydia Fletcher, known locally as Aunt Lydia, though she wasn't literally anyone's aunt. She'd lived in Timber Bend her whole life and reportedly had an encyclopedic knowledge of local legends. After exchanging pleasantries, they sat at her kitchen table. The smell of lavender and old books clung to every surface. Aunt Lydia insisted on pouring each of them a cup of tea before letting Lucas talk. When he recounted his story, the forest, the figure with the lantern, the warning, the dream, the intruder, Aunt Lydia listened intently, her eyes sharp despite her age. "I've heard many versions of that tale," she finally said. "Some call him the lantern keeper, others the warden of the woods. Legends say he appears when dark forces stir in the forest. But the real question is, what is he warning you about?" Lucas shrugged, frustration gnawing at him. "I wish I knew. He seemed more concerned about me being in the forest at night. But then he followed me." Aunt Lydia's gaze drifted to the window, as if expecting to see the lantern out there. "It's said that the lantern keeper tries to protect mortals by scaring them away. But the stories vary about why the forest is dangerous. Some say a curse lurks in those pines and old presents that devours souls or takes them away. Others claim it's just the keeper's domain, and he doesn't want trespassers." Kelly leaned forward. "We need something more concrete: dates, recorded sightings, any connection to missing persons, anything that might explain this figure's intrusion at the ranger station." Aunt Lydia tapped her fingertips on the table. "Long ago, maybe 70 or 80 years, there were tales of a forester named Brenwall who carried a lantern and guided lost travelers to safety. But after a terrible fire, Brenwall vanished, and survivors started seeing a phantom light wandering the burnt woods at night. Some insisted Brenwall's spirit couldn't rest. Others speculated he made a bargain with something older." Lucas felt a chill. But he told me to leave, he said, recalling that resonant voice. He didn't mention a fire or guiding me to safety. He just said, "You should not be here after dark." Aunt Lydia nodded. The story may have twisted over the decades, but if you encountered him, that's no small thing. He rarely shows himself directly. Silence fell around the table. Outside, a raven croaked, breaking the tension. "I'll keep looking into any old records I have," Aunt Lydia offered. "But do be careful. These forests hold secrets best left undisturbed." Armed with Aunt Lydia's half-answers, Lucas and Kelly returned to Pinehaven Reserve. The rest of the day passed quietly. No new sightings, no fresh clues. Lucas tried to piece things together while performing mundane tasks like refilling map racks at the visitor center and issuing fishing permits. Yet a nagging unease trailed him. He found himself glancing over his shoulder whenever he entered a dimly lit corridor, or pausing to listen if he heard the slightest rustle in the treetops. Could the lantern keeper appear at any time, even in daylight? That night, a sense of foreboding settled in. Kelly stayed late at the station, working on inventory, offering to hang around in case anything happened. At midnight, Lucas felt too restless to stay indoors. He told Kelly he was going to check the perimeter near the station, just a short walk. Outside, the moonlight cast long shadows, and the pine needles glimmered silver. Lucas ventured along a gravel path that looped around the station. The hush was profound, broken only by the distant cry of some nocturnal creature. 100 yards from the station, near a small clearing, he caught a glimpse of something in the corner of his eye, a subtle flicker of light among the trees. Tension stabbed through him. He moved closer, hand instinctively hovering near the flashlight on his belt. He spotted it again. A faint glow. It did not bob or sway like before, but it hovered, flickering almost rhythmically. As he strained to see better, a voice, the same low, resonant one, drifted through the pines. "You do not listen." Lucas's breath hitched. He wanted to call out, but found his throat suddenly dry. The glow intensified, and he made out the faint silhouette of the lantern keeper. This time, though, the figure stood partially hidden by a broad pine trunk. Only the lantern was clearly visible. After mustering some courage, Lucas called, "What are you warning me about?" No response. The figure watched him, or seemed to watch him through the gloom. A cold sweat broke out on Lucas's forehead. He felt an inexplicable presence behind him, as though something vast and unseen lurked in the darkness. Steeling himself, Lucas took a step forward, but the lantern's glow dimmed abruptly. By the time he reached the tree, no one was there. A chill breeze passed through the clearing, and the night resumed its oppressive silence. Back at the station, he found Kelly in the corridor, rummaging through a supply cabinet. She glanced up as he entered. "You saw something, didn't you?" she asked, reading his pale face. He nodded, swallowing. He was there again, said, "You do not listen," then vanished. Kelly closed the cabinet door. "This is escalating. We need to figure out what he doesn't want us to see." Sleep eluded Lucas the rest of that week. The lantern keeper, though only encountered twice more at a distance, occupied all of his waking thoughts. He was convinced something deeper lay behind the warnings, an old force in the woods that the keeper was trying, in a twisted way, to protect him from him. Yet why show up at the station, even opening his door in the dead of night? One possibility set Lucas's nerves on edge. Maybe the keeper was giving him a personal caution, a final ultimatum. He spent his off hours researching local legends, reading every scrap of folklore Aunt Lydia sent him. Some stories described will-o'-the-wisp-like lights leading travelers off safe paths. Others spoke of a spirit bound to wander the forest to atone for a great sin, but none gave a straightforward explanation for the intrusions at the station or the haunting presence in his dreams. When the first snowfall arrived, Lucas felt an odd mixture of relief and dread. Snow might discourage the eerie visits. At least there would be tracks, he reasoned. If the lantern keeper returned, he'd at least leave footprints behind. One snowy night, Lucas found himself alone on station grounds again, Kelly having gone home. The wind rattled the windows, and the generator hummed. A sense of claustrophobia pressed in. so he stepped onto the porch to breathe in the cold air. Snow stretched in all directions, pure white under the porch light. A shadow flickered at the edge of the forest, and once again that faint glow appeared. A moment later, the silhouette manifested a shape holding a dim lantern. Lucas's pulse thundered. But this time the figure did not retreat. He took a flashlight and quietly trudged across the snow, each step crunching loud in the stillness. As he approached, he noticed something truly strange. There were no footprints preceding him, and the figure did not leave any indentations in the snow. It was as if it hovered inches above the ground. "This is your last chance," the figure said, voice layered with echoes. "Once it chooses you, there is no escape." Confusion spiked in Lucas's mind. "Who chooses me? What do you mean?" But the figure turned away, lantern light flaring. For an instant, the entire forest glowed with an unnatural brightness, revealing looming pines and swirling flakes of snow. Then the light winked out. Darkness returned, leaving Lucas disoriented and alone under the swirling snowflakes. Desperate for answers, Lucas dug deeper into archived records at the local ranger headquarters, a larger facility several miles away. Within dusty filing cabinets, he stumbled on an old incident log from 1937. It mentioned repeated sightings of lights in Pine Haven Reserve and the disappearance of a forest warden named Silas Brenwall. Brenwall? Lucas recalled Aunt Lydia's mention of Brenwall the forester. The log stated that Brenwall was last seen heading into the woods at dusk to investigate unearthly lights. He never returned. His final note read, "I must find the source and put a stop to it. It calls out to me." Spine tingling, Lucas also discovered mentions of hikers who vanished over the ensuing decades, their last known location often near Terrapin Creek. The logs were sparse. Lost hikers are unfortunately common, but a handful reported seeing a man with a lantern. Lucas felt a jolt of realization. The lantern keeper might be Brenwall or what he's become, but that still didn't explain what the keeper was trying to protect people from. Night after night, Lucas dreamed of that flickering lantern. In one dream, he saw a swirling mist, deep in the forest, shaping itself into monstrous forms. In another, he glimpsed dark silhouettes with elongated limbs and hollow eyes gliding among the pines. The lantern keeper always appeared at the periphery, silent except for the echo of leave. He woke each time in a cold sweat, half convinced something stood at the foot of his cot. That feeling of being watched never left him. One morning, fatigued and unnerved, Lucas told Kelly he needed to see Terrapin Creek again during daylight to see if any clues remained. Kelly offered to join, but he insisted on going alone, as if the presence demanded a solitary approach. It was a crisp, clear day. Snow still covered the ground, though the creek continued to run. Sunlight gleamed on the water's surface. Lucas parked in the same spot as before, noticing how quiet it felt. Even the usual winter bird song was absent. He walked along the creek's edge, scanning for footprints or any sign of unusual disturbances. Nothing. The entire area was pristine, untouched. The only evidence of life came in the form of deer prints crossing to the opposite bank. As he stood, a sudden swirl of wind rattled the branches overhead. He caught a fleeting whiff of something unidentifiable like damp moss mixed with a metallic tang. The smell vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. Lucas exhaled, frustration mounting. If the keeper only showed up at night, how could he gather clues in daylight? Maybe that was the point. The phenomenon existed in a realm that overlapped with night's shadows. Leaving empty-handed, he felt a mounting sense of obsession. He had to know what was going on. His obsession culminated in a dangerous plan. Lucas decided to stake out Terrapin Creek from dusk until dawn, determined to confront the lantern keeper face to face and demand answers. Kelly was uneasy about the idea. Aunt Lydia advised against it, warning that the night is no friend to those who wander alone. But Lucas's resolve was ironclad. So one evening, he ventured into the forest with a tent, warm gear, and plenty of supplies. Snow blanketed the terrain, reflecting moonlight. He made his camp near the creek, a small fire crackling. With hours to kill, he tried reading a paperback novel, but he couldn't concentrate. His gaze kept drifting into the dark forest. Around midnight, clouds rolled in, obscuring the moon. The wind rustled trees, making shadows dance. A sense of anticipation lodged in his gut. This was it. If the lantern keeper was around, this remote hour would summon him. Sure enough, the faint glow emerged upstream, bobbing along the edge of the creek. Lucas stood, heart hammering. He left his fire crackling, grabbing a flashlight, though he kept it switched off to avoid giving himself away. Stepping lightly, he approached the glow. His boots crunched softly in the snow. Adrenaline burned in his veins. At length, he caught sight of the keeper's silhouette again, a tall form cloaked in shadows, lantern raised. "Stop!" Lucas called, voice echoing off the trees. "I need answers." The lantern paused, the figure tilting its head as though listening. Then slowly it proceeded deeper into the woods, away from the creek, the lantern swaying like a lure. Despite every instinct warning him, Lucas followed. Branches snagged his sleeves. Fresh snow crumbled underfoot, but he kept that pale glow in sight. It lured him deeper and deeper until the gentle sound of running water faded into the distance. Finally, the figure halted in a small clearing. The moon was gone behind clouds, and darkness reigned except for the lantern's light, which illuminated the keeper's gaunt face. It appeared truly ancient, like bark or stone shaped into a human countenance. The eyes glittered with an otherworldly sheen. Lucas's voice shook. "Why do you keep warning me? What is in these woods?" The figure's mouth moved strangely as though struggling to form words. "You were chosen," it said, voice echoing with faint layers. A new chill lanced through Lucas. Chosen by what? The keeper inhaled, or seemed to, as if gathering breath. "The forest hunts," it answered cryptically. "A presence older than memory. Some call it the devourer, others simply the darkness. I'm bound to keep wanderers from straying too far so they don't become consumed." "Consumed? By what by you?" The keeper's lantern flared, casting flickering shadows across the clearing. "No, not by me. I walk these woods to ensure no one stumbles into the depth. But it's found you. It sees you." Lucas took a step back, heart galloping. "Then, can I escape it? Can I leave the park?" A flicker of regret or something akin to sorrow passed over the keeper's face. "The choice was sealed when you first saw the lantern. My warnings were not enough. It's near. It wants a host." Before Lucas could speak, a terrible hush fell, swallowing every noise. Even the wind paused. He heard a pulsating roar in his ears, as though his own blood hammered a frantic beat. The shadows at the clearing's edge thickened, twisting in unnatural shapes. The keeper's voice rose urgently. "Go, run. I will try to hold it back." Instinct overrode reason. Lucas turned and fled, snow spraying from his boots. Behind him he glimpsed the lantern's light flaring again, accompanied by an indescribable cacophony, a roar mixed with a churning hush, as if the night itself had come alive. Panting, Lucas raced through the undergrowth, half blind in the darkness. Branches whipped his cheeks, leaving stinging scratches. Several times he stumbled, tumbling into the snow, his breath ragged. A primal fear propelled him. Something monstrous lurked behind, something that might not have a physical shape, but could bend the forest to its will. He dared not look back. Eventually the creek's sound guided him, and he found his way back to his campsite only to discover the fire had been extinguished as if snuffed by an unseen hand. The entire area dripped with an otherworldly chill. He grabbed his pack with shaking hands, fumbling to slip it over his shoulders. Then, to his astonishment, he saw a slender tendril of darkness swirling just beyond the tree line, ignoring the faint starlight. The shape seemed intangible yet horrifyingly real, gliding across the snow without leaving a trace. "No, no, no," he muttered, heart clenching. He bolted toward his truck, which was a quarter-mile away. That short distance felt like an eternity. Each step threatened to give out under him. Every rustle in the trees sounded like a monstrous predator. Finally, he found the pickup, flung open the door, and started the engine. The headlights pierced the gloom, revealing only falling snow and the trunk of a massive pine. He drove like a man possessed, sliding on the snowy track until he reached the main park road, then continued until he saw the faint glow of the ranger station. Relief flooded him as the building's porch light came into view. Kelly was inside, pacing. When Lucas burst in, covered in snow and trembling, she rushed to him. "What happened? Are you okay?" He could hardly speak, adrenaline still spiking. "The forest. Something's there, the keeper. Tried to help me." Kelly led him to a chair near the heater. Slowly he recounted everything: the chase, the monstrous presence, the cryptic words. Kelly's eyes widened with every sentence. "I've heard whispers of that," she whispered. "Some of the older rangers believe in an evil force out there, a presence that latches onto certain people. It's said that once you've been marked, it follows you no matter where you go." Lucas buried his face in his hands. "That's what the keeper said, that I was chosen, that I can't escape." A tense silence stretched. Finally, Kelly sighed. "We need more than folklore. We need to figure out if there's a real threat, some phenomenon or psychological effect that's endangering you." "But phenomenon?" Lucas repeated, letting out a hollow laugh. "Kelly, I saw something that defies explanation." They sat in uneasy conversation until dawn tinted the sky. Neither wanted to address the core fear. If this presence was truly supernatural, what could they possibly do to stop it? From that night onward, a slow unraveling gripped Lucas. His dreams became more vivid, plunging him into labyrinthine forests under blood-red skies. He'd see the lantern keeper, always at a distance, never speaking. In these dreams, the forest felt hungry, as though it reached out with spectral limbs to pull him in. Waking offered no comfort. He found strange footprints, vaguely human but elongated, near the station each morning. Electrical glitches plagued the building, lights flickering for no apparent reason. One afternoon, he noticed black stains on the porch boards, as though charred by an invisible flame. When he tried to clean them, they wouldn't come off, as if burned into the very grain of the wood. Kelly grew worried. She contacted headquarters about Lucas's mental state, suggesting he see a therapist. But these manifestations weren't in his mind alone. Others at the station started complaining of odd noises, a feeling that they were being watched from the tree line. In desperation, Lucas and Kelly returned to Aunt Lydia, who greeted them with a solemn expression. She led them to a cluttered attic room, where old maps and diaries lay scattered on a large oak table. "I've been studying my grandfather's journals," she began. "He was a trapper who spent many nights in these forests. He believed in an entity called the Devourer, an ancient force that preyed on people's souls. According to him, a guardian spirit roamed the woods, lantern in hand, warning intruders away." She flipped open a leather-bound volume, revealing sketches of a monstrous silhouette with claw-like limbs. Next to it was a stylized figure holding a lantern. "That's the keeper," she said, tapping the lantern figure. Then she pointed to the beast. "And that must be the Devourer." Lucas stared at the sketches, a sense of dreadful familiarity. "It's near. It wants a host," Lydia continued. "My grandfather claimed that once the Devourer chooses someone, it will dog their steps until it can fully manifest, until it can consume that person's mind or body. Only the lantern keeper stands in its way, but he can't always succeed. Some say it's a never-ending battle between these two forces." Kelly's face paled. "Is there any way to free Lucas from that thing's attention?" Aunt Lydia shook her head. "Legends speak of a ritual or offering that might placate the Devourer, but it's all speculation. My grandfather wrote that the keeper tries to drive people out of the forest before the Devourer marks them. Once marked, you become a beacon for that evil presence." Lucas felt numb. "So it's unstoppable?" Lydia patted his arm gently. "Sometimes the only way to break free is to leave entirely, to go somewhere so foreign that the Devourer can't follow. But even that's not guaranteed. The old tales say it can cross vast distances if the bond is strong. A week later, things reached a breaking point. Strange footprints multiplied around the station every morning. The black stains inside the building spread, forming swirling patterns across the floor and walls. Electronic devices malfunctioned. Tension soared among the staff, many of whom sensed a lurking threat but didn't understand its source. Lucas, feeling the weight of guilt that he was the cause, decided he had to act. He resolved to return to Terrapin Creek one last time, to confront the Keeper or the Devourer itself. Maybe he could end it, or at least draw the presence away from the station and its innocent staff. Kelly begged him not to go alone, but he insisted. "I'm the one it wants. If I confront it, maybe I can keep everyone else safe." Armed with a flashlight, a flare gun, and a growing fatalism, he hiked to Terrapin Creek at twilight. Snow still draped the forest, though patches had begun to melt, creating slushy terrain. The sun dipped below the horizon, the sky a palette of reds and oranges that quickly bled into purple twilight. At the creek's edge, he lit a small lantern of his own, a feeble attempt to mirror the Keeper's light. Hours passed, no sign of the Keeper, no sign of anything. The temperature dropped, and the silence deepened. Then, around midnight, the forest changed. The wind stopped, the creek's babble faded as though muffled behind invisible walls. A suffocating hush enveloped the area. The hair on Lucas's arms stood on end, primal fear gripping him. A shape coalesced at the edge of his vision. Not the Lantern Keeper this time, but something darker, a swirl of shadows that condensed into a looming figure with elongated limbs. Its eyes were empty hollows, and a malignant energy radiated from it, like heat shimmers off asphalt. Lucas's blood turned to ice. He tried to speak, but his voice died in his throat. The creature glided forward, silent as death, the snow beneath it untouched. Suddenly, a burst of light flared to Lucas's left. The Lantern Keeper appeared, lantern blazing bright white. The creature recoiled, letting out a silent shriek that pounded in Lucas's skull. "Leave," the Keeper commanded, directing Lucas away from the confrontation. But the Devourer lunged, spectral limbs reaching. Desperate to help, Lucas aimed his flare gun at the monstrous shape and fired. A bright red plume sizzled through the air, momentarily illuminating the clearing. The Devourer hissed, if one could call that voiceless shriek a hiss, and for an instant it seemed to shrink back. The Keeper seized the moment, stepping between Lucas and the creature. Lantern light pulsed, intensifying until it rivaled the glow of a full moon. The Devourer writhed, shadows twisting around it. Lucas scrambled away, eyes stinging from the brightness. He could barely see, but he sensed movement in the corner of his vision. The Devourer's shape flickered, as though fighting to remain coherent. The Keeper advanced, swirling the lantern in a slow arc. A humming chant, or something akin to it, filled the clearing, yet the Devourer was not defeated. It lashed out, a dark tendril piercing the air. The Lantern Keeper staggered, a guttural moan escaping. The lantern's glow faltered. Lucas realized with dawning horror that the Keeper might lose this battle. Summoning courage he didn't know he had, he picked up a fallen branch, thrust it into his own small lantern flame, and brandished it like a torch. Charging forward felt like running into an invisible tide of malevolence. Each step weighed 1,000 pounds. The Devourer turned its hollow gaze on him, and Lucas felt his soul tremble. But he continued, thrusting the burning branch at the swirling shadows. A flash of furious light exploded from the Keeper's lantern, accompanied by a thunderous crack. The Devourer wavered, shrieking silently once more, then dissolved into roiling darkness that dissipated among the trees. In the aftermath, the clearing fell quiet. The Lantern Keeper stood there, lantern raised, flickering unsteadily. Lucas's chest heaved, heart pounding. "It's gone?" he managed to say between breaths. The Keeper's voice was faint. "For now, it will return." Lucas stepped closer, noticing that the Keeper's form looked more transparent, as though drained of substance. "What can I do?" The Keeper gazed at him with those uncanny eyes. "Leave these woods forever. Do not return. If you remain, it will find you." Lucas swallowed hard. What about you? A sorrowful pause, then softly, I am bound. With that, the keeper faded into the night, lantern glow diminishing until only darkness remained. Shaken, Lucas stumbled back to his truck, not even caring about the gear he left behind. Dawn found him knocking on Kelly's door, disheveled and ghost-pale. He told her everything. We have to inform everyone, she said, though her voice trembled. We can't let hikers wander off trail now. Lucas only shook his head. We can't fight that thing with warnings alone. It's ancient, unstoppable. The keeper can only hold it at bay. With a heavy heart, he resigned from his post at Pinehaven. Kelly wasn't surprised. She'd seen how deeply this ordeal had broken him. He packed up his few belongings, loaded them into his old pickup, and prepared to drive as far from Pinehaven as possible. The morning he left, he found a small gift basket on his truck's hood, an assortment of local pastries, and a handwritten note from Aunt Lydia. Take care, and may the lantern keeper's light guide you to safety. He wiped away tears, wondering if he'd ever know peace. Lucas drove for hours, miles upon miles away from the forest that had become his nightmare. Late that night, he pulled into a roadside motel, battered by exhaustion. In the cramped room, he sank onto the bed, images of swirling darkness still haunting his mind. Sleep came fitfully. At around 3 in the morning, he woke with a start, the echo of a familiar presence prickling at the back of his neck. For a moment, he was sure he saw the faint glow of a lantern through the thin curtains. Heart pounding, he rushed to the window and peered outside. The motel parking lot was empty except for a single flickering street lamp. No sign of a lantern or the keeper. He shut his eyes, relief warring with lingering dread. It can't follow me here, he thought, but a tiny voice in his mind refused to be silenced. What if it can? Back in Pinehaven Reserve, rumors about vanishing lights persisted. Occasionally, campers would report a flickering glow in the night, only to find no trace come morning. Some claimed to see a tall figure with a lantern, drifting among the pines. Word spread that the forest was haunted, that a spirit tried to warn people off certain trails after dusk, and sometimes, in the hush before dawn, someone might see 2 silhouettes in the distance, one bearing a lantern, the other looming in swirling darkness locked in an eternal standoff. As for Lucas, he continued to drive, drifting from one place to another, chasing the hope that he could outrun the shadow that had once singled him out. But in every lonely rest stop, every silent stretch of highway at night, he'd find himself peering into the darkness, wondering if the lantern keeper was still out there, if the devourer's silent footsteps were drawing near. Perhaps on some nights, he'd even catch that pale glow on the horizon and feel a pang of mixed terror and gratitude-terror at the memory of the devourer, and gratitude that someone, something, still tried to keep the darkness at bay. Because deep down, Lucas understood the keeper's final warning: the forest hunts, and no one can stay hidden forever.